Members of the executive will have to disclose donations they receive for internal political party campaigns. It's after the Constitutional Court today upheld an earlier ruling that the Executive Ethics Code is unconstitutional, unlawful and invalid. We're joined now by the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa's Grant Masterson. Grant, good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight. So the reaffirmation of the initial ruling that came from a lower court by the Constitutional Court today, a very important point, especially when it comes to matters of transparency, accountability for a country's politicians.
Absolutely. As you say, it's been confirmed now by the highest court in the land. And so there's a 12-month period within which the Executive Ethics Act has to be rewritten to more fully comply with those principles themselves. And so certainly, I think for anyone who believes in those principles, a victory from the court today.
What is also significant is that this doesn't just apply to, let's say, members of the ANC, because we know that the matter that led to this even ending up in the court was around President Cyril Ramaphosa and his 2017 campaign. But it will apply to all members who, of course, take that ethics code across the political spectrum.
That's right. It will apply possibly even down to the municipal level, to local councillor level. So it's going to have some fairly far-reaching impacts. At the heart of the issue is the monies that are used to win political contestations. And as has been pointed out on numerous occasions, the amount of money that is flowing around within the system itself to enable people to win candidacies. You know, the rumors and the whispers of brown bags of cash being passed across to people who can influence votes in the right direction. You know, the influence of money in South African politics, as we must admit is the case around the world, is something that does defeat the principles that the court upheld of accountability and transparency in particular.
We see a great deal of nitpicking when it comes to funding around the ANC, including funding for individual campaigns within the party for political party positions. How do you think that this is going to affect some of the opposition parties and the extent to which their own processes will now be under the spotlight?
Yes, look, this applies across the government officials spectrum. So this is not a judgment that targets necessarily the governing party only. Bear in mind that the Democratic Alliance governs whole swathes of the country, that there are coalition governments in certain of the metros. So any person who as a public official could be considered to fall under the ambit of the Executive Ethics Act is certainly now going to have to pay much more attention to the type of money that they receive, because the possibility of donors being brought into the open is going to increase exponentially once we see the new wording of the Act. Now, we haven't seen that yet. All we have is a judgment. So, of course, there is still actually a lot of work to do before we can celebrate fully, because the wording of the Executive Ethics Act can also be worded in such a way as to continue to try and defeat these principles. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. This is going to have wide-reaching consequences for a number of public officials who rely on private funding, who rely on monies from particular benefactors to not only win elections at the ballot box, but also to win the elections that get them nominated in the first place.
Grant, it's interesting that you're talking about what that final ethics code then will look like after this 12-month period, because already a level of skepticism being expressed, because, in terms of the process then that the presidency will follow in ensuring that what that final act looks like is, in fact, in the true spirit of what this ruling means.
Yeah, that's right. So whilst this is an important step towards more accountable public officials, something that South Africa desperately needs right now, the work is not done, because exactly that, the judiciary does not overreach into the realm of the executive or the legislature to prescribe how the Executive Ethics Act is going to have to be rewritten here. In this case, the presidency will most likely be the organ of state that is going to rewrite this particular Executive Ethics Act. And so they are the ones who are going to put the terms in place. Now, of course, the Executive Ethics Act could always be brought back again to the courts to test once more whether it does comply with the principles that the court has outlined. But I think we need to also be asking as citizens a deeper question, which is that why was it necessary for us to get the Constitutional Court to affirm this? The President, we know, is the first citizen of the country, and it is his primary responsibility to advance the principles that the Constitutional Court has upheld. And so this should not be something that we should be looking on with a degree of skepticism. We should be saying this is the president, this is the number one citizen, the first citizen, and he is the embodiment of the principles of the Constitution. So that is the ideal that we should be expecting from our president. And of course, now we will have to see whether or not the executive does come to the party and pass and put together a new executive ethics code that does give life to those particular principles.
Grant, does that not have to do with how the president has managed the fallout around his funding, in particular for the CR17 campaign within the ANC? Yes, granted, a ruling like this does not apply retrospectively, but certainly the president has done everything possible to ensure that that information does not see the light of day.
That's correct. Yes, the original genesis of this particular finding exactly emanates from the allegations around funding to the CR17 campaign. And of course, there was that clip, the leaked audio of the president himself saying that he was going to take one for the team, figuratively speaking, when speaking to ANC members, but that he wasn't the only one whose campaign had lots of money to hide. So, there's absolutely should be concern for anyone who has been paying attention to our politics. And I think that the sad thing is that as our first citizen, we are going to have to watch the president very closely as to what kind of a code is put together. And the language, does it actually meet the standards that the ConCourt has demanded from the president and from the executive?
All right, Grant, we're going to leave it there for tonight. Grant Masterson, Head of Programs at the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa.